p.m. only on BloombergQuint.
Good morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on BloombergQuint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines. Markets across the globe continue to tumble as concerns over the coronavirus remain. China extends the Lunar New Year holiday by 3 days. HDFC's third quarter net profit gets a boost from the Bandhan Bank Finance merger. Loan book rose at 13%. Higher yields and lower fuel prices contributed to Interglobe Aviation's third quarter performance. The carrier, however, has cut its FY20 capacity growth guidance to 20% from the earlier 25%. The Enforcement Directorate has arrested Dewan Housing promoter Kapil Wadhwan in connection with its money laundering probe against deceased gangster Iqbal Mirchi. And Maruti Suzuki will be the only Nifty company that will be reporting its third quarter results today. Let's take a look at the US markets first. They began the new trading week on a negative note. Benchmark indices saw their first 1% plus fall in 2020. The S&P 500 fell the most in 4 months. The Dow erased its gains for the year, and the Nasdaq fell the most since August. Abigail Doolittle of Bloomberg News tells you exactly what happened in that trading session in this report.
Monday's Wall Street session was risk-off as stocks sold off and other risk assets sold off as well. Haven assets rallying at the end of the day. The Dow, the S&P 500, and the Nasdaq all down by 1.5% or more. The worst day for the S&P 500 going back to early October. It was also the first greater than 1% move for the S&P 500 since October. When stretches of complacency have been snapped in the past, it's typically led to periods of big volatility. So today's greater than 1% move down for the S&P 500 could be a signal of more downside volatility ahead. Now, all of this, of course, on fears of the coronavirus and that it could impact global economic growth, perhaps even with time impact the U.S. corporate profit outlook. Leading the way down last week were some of the more sensitive sectors, such as the Dow Transports, down once again. In fact, the Dow Transports now negative on the year, down about 1%. The S&P 500 up 0.4%. That could be a bearish tell, as could the slide in commodities. The Bloomberg Commodity Index down once again, the worst stretch since August, down about 5 days in a row, losing about 5% over that time period. Oil down even far more, down 6 days in a row, losing more than 13% over that time period. Right now, headed to its worst day since January. And of course, China is the world's largest user of natural resources. So again, the slump we're seeing in commodities and oil in particular suggests that some investors, traders, bracing for the possibility that the coronavirus could really eat into the global demand picture for oil. As for individual movers, lots of movers on coronavirus fears, including airlines. We had American Airlines and United Airlines both down more than 5%. We had energy stocks down in a huge way. The S&P 500 energy sector down about 7.5% over the last 5 days in sympathy with oil. We also had luxury and retailers down, including in the European session, Hermes. We also had during the U.S. session, Estee Lauder losing more than 4%. One bank downgrading those shares on the coronavirus fears. Starbucks down 3%. So really any company that has significant exposure to China selling off. That was especially true for the technology sector. The chips down by almost 4%, especially sensitive to that Wuhan province. A lot of chip making going on there. Apple sliding in a big way, one of the biggest point drags for the S&P 500. So the risk rally that we've had going on for weeks, really since the middle of October, coming to a sudden halt over the last 2 days, risk off, and confirming this sell-off for the risk assets. Haven bonds and the yen rallying. The 10-year yield down for a 5th day in a row. Of course, price trades inverse to yield. The best stretch for treasuries going back to August. So again, Monday's Wall Street session, risk off, with both stocks and commodities dropping in a big way. Haven bonds and that yen and gold rallying. From New York, Abigail Doolittle, Bloomberg News.
And that seems to be the case in the Asia-Pacific region as well, as as it refers to the markets that are open, remember that China and Hong Kong remain shut this week. We have the Nikkei 225, which is trading with cuts of as much as 0.9%. And you also have the other two markets, the early risers, that is the market in South Korea as well as the market in Australia, trading with cuts. But limited cues because some of those key markets are shut, but the headline, of course, continues to be the coronavirus. And let's get you the latest there. The death toll has risen to 81, with China extending the New Year holiday, like I said, till the 2nd of February. The authorities have also warned that the virus is currently not under control. US citizens have also been advised to reconsider travel that they have planned to China. Max Neeson of Bloomberg Opinion has the latest update from China.
It would be really difficult under any circumstances, but at a time of the year when so many people were already planning to travel, that just makes it all the more challenging. And also certain features of this particular virus, although this is something that we're just getting from certain authorities in China, suggesting that it may be able to infect people while people aren't showing symptoms.
Like fever.
Exactly.
So you cannot screen people that travel through their temperature.
Exactly. So that makes screening much more difficult, whether you just hold people, wait until you test them more thoroughly, or if you let some people through, that also makes containment that much more difficult. And also the question of to what degree people are actually complying with various travel restrictions or curfews, regardless of the people that have already just left. So it's a tremendously difficult public health challenge. And despite the fact that China's taken, unprecedented steps, this is, I imagine, the biggest set of travel restrictions we've ever seen related to a disease.
40 million people not allowed to travel.
It's really incredible. But even that notwithstanding, you are still seeing a pretty rapid rate of transmission, although still pretty low outside of China, but within quite rapid.
Max, of course, another dimension to the health challenge you mentioned is the search for either a vaccine or a treatment. But these things take time, don't they?
They really do. And, we're seeing some companies trying some new approaches, setting some really aggressive timelines, hoping to get first-in-human trials within a few months. But even if, they meet those really optimistic timelines, you still have to test it. You still have to build up, if it works, and that's a big but, have to build up manufacturing capacity. In the meantime, some other things are being tried, repurposing some current antiviral medications, running sort of on-the-ground clinical trials. We'll see whether that's able to have an impact, but to have a medicine, a real prophylactic vaccine, something that can slow or halt the progress, we're still quite a long ways away from there.
If the outbreak continues at this pace, how soon would the WHO have to reconsider them declaring this an international health emergency?
I think in relative short order, and you saw the head of the WHO already heading to China. We'll get a look at what things look like on the ground. It'll depend to some extent on whether there's further human-to-human transmission outside of China.
Which so far has not occurred.
I think there's been one case, perhaps in Canada, where the spouse of someone who was infected also appears to have gotten the virus. But beyond that, it's been pretty limited so far. And since that declaration is all about coordinating responses across governments, that's sort of the bar that I think they're waiting, perhaps, to see is met.
All right, let's see what else is making headlines across the globe. Sherry Ahn of Bloomberg News brings you the first word headlines.
The U.S. is advising citizens to reconsider travel plans to China amid a surge in the number of people infected with coronavirus. More than 2,700 cases have now been confirmed, with 81 people dead. China is building new hospitals in Wuhan, with existing medical centers overwhelmed. Nearly all the confirmed sufferers are Chinese people or tourists who have been to Wuhan recently. The deadly infection is another blow to casino operators in Macau. The number of visitors from the mainland fell 80% on Sunday compared to the equivalent day in the Lunar New Year break in 2019. The fall comes after casinos suffered their worst year since 2015, and the outlook is unlikely to improve as China further tightens travel restrictions to counter the virus. Macau has 6 confirmed cases. President Trump's impeachment defense has been hit by revelations in a book by his former national security advisor, John Bolton. The president's case has relied on the lack of first-hand evidence that he tied military backup for Ukraine to an investigation of Joe Biden and his son. However, the New York Times says Bolton's manuscript claims the president said he wouldn't approve the aid until Ukraine handed over material related to Biden. President Trump aims to release his administration's plan for Middle East peace on Tuesday, saying he hopes the Palestinians and the Arab nations will support it, but he can live with its rejection. The president spoke as he met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. The White House says it's a good start, but Palestinian leaders have already condemned the plan as futile. China has been buying wheat as part of its plan to fill import quotas set by the World Trade Organization, but U.S. farmers are having to wait their turn. In the past 2 months, China has bought about 1 million metric tons of Australian, Canadian, and French wheat. The helicopter carrying NBA star Kobe Bryant had been cleared to fly in poor weather, but not in the dense clouds it was in before it crashed. The Sikorsky was flying under FAA rules that mandate the pilot to maintain visible contact with the ground, but in the final minute before the crash, flight data show it almost certainly climbed into the fog. The NBA says Tuesday's game between the Lakers and the Clippers has been postponed.
Let's take a look at how we're set up for trade here in India now. Agam Vakil is joining me to tell you all about that and also what's happening in the futures and options space. Agam, one major Nifty company, but a couple of others that have reported numbers. Perhaps that's going to play a part today. How are we looking?
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. Also looking a little bit of consolidation coming through. Now, we have that's what the SGX Nifty is indicating. So we'll be watching out for that. Now, as far as the day of trade yesterday is concerned, we did see a lot of sharp new weakness, at least as far as the benchmarks go, with a 1% cut. The weakness was not as evident in the broader markets, and it was mixed cues when it comes to the banking indices, considering there was some declines in some handful of your private sector names. But as far as ADRs go right now, again, a mixed picture, but we are looking at sharp drop in the likes of Vedanta, Tata Motors, and HDFC Bank. And it's similar for Wipro. Dr. Reddy's, of course, on the other hand, advancing on the back of steady earnings coming through. Fund flows were, again, of prime importance because we start seeing another round of selling from FIIs. So largely on account of a lot of caution set across the globe. And we didn't see too much as coming down to domestic institutions. But in terms of contributors, well, we did see some very heavyweights weighing down on the indices, which would include your HDFC Twins, Reliance Industries, as well as Kotak Mahindra Bank. Let's move on and talk about futures and options because we did see selling coming through, and well, it is expiry, so we are starting to see some amount of, well, short build up as we move into the next series. The Nifty, Bank Nifty futures too, where rollover standing at around 24%. This is where the selling is a little more pronounced moving in. And we are still looking at a 500-point range. However, well, you know, between 12,200 and 12,000, pardon me, 12,000, 12,500. But for now, it does seem like we have very stiff resistance around the 12,200 mark. And it does look like it's unlikely that the Nifty may move above that, at least in the near term. And that's explained by the 12,200 call, which has seen a lot of writing. Moving on, well, when it comes to the VIX, it has risen by as much as 10%. At around 17.2. This is something that we had expected yesterday as well. And the Nifty put call ratio falling at 1.1. And in terms of stocks, we are keeping an eye on ONGC, of course, which did see an increase in OI. But let's talk about a handful of those stocks which are looking at decline. So Voltas, Adani Enterprises, and Yes Bank among the list of stocks which did see, well, largely a lot of rollovers coming through, Alex. But let's keep an eye on the VIX, which has risen quite substantially over the past couple of days.
Thanks so much for that, Agam. All right, on to stocks that we have to watch out for in trade today. Somit Sarkar is joining me now to tell you all about the stocks in the news. Good morning, Somit. What do you have for us today?
Good morning, Alex. I'll start off with the earnings that came in post-market. Firstly, Interglobe Aviation, the results were above estimates. Higher yield, strong passenger growth rate, higher passenger load factor and lower cost aided the numbers in the third quarter of financial year 2020. Now, the capacity growth in the third quarter increased by nearly 19.3% as against the company guidance of 22%. For FY20 also, the company has lowered its capacity growth guidance to 20% from 25% earlier, and for FY21, the company is expecting the capacity to grow by around 20%. NAVIN Fluorine revenues were up 11%, EBITDA increased by 26%, net profit was higher by 18%, margins came in higher at 25.1% on account of lower raw material cost. And if you see segment-wise, the specialty business revenue was up 33%, while the CRAM business revenue was down 5%. Torrent Pharma, the results were in line with estimates, but the core performance was weak for the company. Higher other income and lower tax rate boosted the net profits. One-time impact of patent-related settlement and litigation costs impacted the financials in the third quarter. United Spirits margins improved due to lower employee costs and other expenses. Volume recovery in prestige and above segments, while popular volumes remained subdued in the third quarter. Gross margins were under pressure, led by higher input costs in the third quarter. In other stocks to watch, firstly Maruti Suzuki, because they came out with this notification which said that the increase in price, they are increasing prices by 0 to 5% across select models due to increase in output cost with effect from January 27th. Adani Gas, because they clarified that they have not been charged with 400 crore rupees penalty from PNGRB. HCL Infosystem, because they will be scaling down the enterprise and consumer distribution business over the next few quarters due to declining business. Music Broadcast, because the board has recommended a bonus issue of 1 share for every 4 shares held. Cholamandalam Investment and Finance, because they have launched their QIP with a floor price of 322.59 rupees per share, which is at a discount of 2% to yesterday's closing. And lastly, on the back of a bull deal, La Opala, because HDFC Mutual Fund has acquired nearly 44.5 lakh shares in the company, while Westbridge Crossover Fund and Jwalamukhi Investment Seller was the seller in this fund.
All right, thanks so much for that, Somit. Long list of stocks that you have to watch out for. If you want to read that list, you can find it in a story on the website BloombergQuint.com. Let's turn to something else now. After having failed to draw a single bidder for its first attempt at privatizing national carrier Air India, the Modi government has sweetened the terms to make a fresh attempt at selling the debt-laden carrier. Nishant Sharma spoke to Civil Aviation Minister Hardeep Singh Puri on what the government is doing differently to attract buyers to the Maharaja. Here's a slice of that conversation.
I like your choice of words. You talked about rational, more sustainable, lucrative. I don't know. That depends on how the outcome is. But look, this is a serious and a well thought through effort. A lot of hard work has gone into it, due diligence. And we have consciously tried to learn from the experience of the last occasion in 2018. You know, consultants will look at individual factors. They will look at specific issues like the external environment. But I think there's a general point. Always before an election, especially an important general election, there's always a degree of caution, which I think creeps in. Right. And the bureaucracy in any case tends to be extra cautious. Why? Because you don't want people turning around later and raising questions or pointing fingers. So I think the run-up to a general election is not perhaps the best time to attempt a very ambitious program of privatization. Mm-hmm. Look, I wasn't here. I was not the Minister of Civil Aviation. So it's wrong for me to speculate on the reasons. All I can tell you is that when the task was entrusted to me and to my colleagues who are part of the ISM, my ministry has been very serious about it. And I can also tell you that so are the other parts of the government. And the ISM is headed by Shri Amit Shah ji. And absolutely we are clear that we've got to go through it this time. Also, that the mistakes which were visible, you are not interested, I mean, at least, I don't know what it was, the degree of overcaution. You put in conditions there, but what you need to do is to put yourself in the shoes of the entity which wants to acquire the asset. Right. I mean, anybody looking at the conditions imposed then would have had many thoughts and would have had to do serious introspection on that. But it didn't work. We learnt our lessons. And we are determined to make it work this time.
Right. So and you also did close to about 8 roadshows that you have done.
Well, I haven't done them. The concerned officials, Air India, they have done 8 roadshows, but that 8 number doesn't capture the totality of the picture, the number of people who've come and spoken to me directly, people who've come and spoken to other parts of the government. And there is interest. Make no mistake, it's a first-class asset. It has physical assets, it has aircraft, it has civil aviation, bilateral access rights, routes. It has many other things which would be the envy of any other airline. And it has a very good track record. I mean, if we didn't have the unsustainable debt, nobody would want to do it. But I mean, on a more basic point, I think governments should not be in the civil aviation business. I mean, governments do not run airlines, or the governments do not conduct this. A private operator can use and introduce drastic efficiencies. You can cut costs, etc. Well, there are still people who are arguing that we shouldn't privatize, we should not disinvest, and that's completely their position. The government is not in a position to sustain the kind of utilization of scarce resources which are better utilized for other essential goods and services which the state needs to provide its citizens.
So you're saying that you're seeing interest both from domestic and also from international investors?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. So the key change is being 100% ownership.
There are other changes. I don't want to simplify. There is a 212-page or thereabouts document. I think everybody should read it. That's why before all these TV interviews, I'm making it a point to say let's not discuss figures, because a figure has a context, it has a perspective. How much was the figure last time? How much is the figure? How much debt is being retired? That's not something you do in a TV interaction.
What kind of I'm sure it's too early to ask, what kind of divestment are you expecting from this sale, given that it has, more sustainable approach that you have come up with?
No, I'm not going to speculate on it. We've started a process today. This process has very well-defined timelines. People will be given 45 days in a very clinical, arm's-length process to raise questions. We will see if we need to tweak the provisions a little. And then they're prescribed. Some people will become identified as, prospective bidders in that process. And that process will go on. We are hoping to complete this part of the work by end March.
Right. And lastly, sir, is there a plan B, plan C?
I'm not. You ask questions on plan B if you have doubts. Let me just say that we are very confident that this plan will go through.
All right, we'll see soon enough. In the meanwhile, let me tell you about some of the stories you'll find on the website BloombergQuint.com. First up, the Enforcement Directorate has arrested the Chairman and Managing Director of Divan Housing Finance, Kapil Wadhwan, in connection with its money laundering probe against deceased gangster Iqbal Mirchi and others. They said Wadhwan has been arrested under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act as he was allegedly not cooperating in the investigation. The case relates to Mirchi's Mumbai properties, which have been called as proceeds of crime by the Enforcement Directorate, and 3 such properties were sold to Sunblink, the company linked to Wadhwan brothers Kapil and Dheeraj. Now, a panel appointed by the Securities and Exchange Board of India is proposing sweeping changes to strengthen the monitoring and enforcement of norms pertaining to related party transactions. The key recommendation is to tweak the definition of related party and indeed related party transactions, and to revise thresholds for classification of such transactions as material. All right, that's all you need to know going into trade today, but do stay tuned. There's clearly lots to talk about, and you'll find all of that right here on Bloomberg Quint.